if you want to look at how we got here over the last, let's say, 60 years of computing, you could think about this as what have we been able to do a one-shot process on? And when we say one shot, that means I put one set of instructions in and I get one thing out or a set of things out, right? But the idea is that I don't have to go back and forth over and over. The back and forth over and over is a very powerful tool, as we'll talk about, for doing testing and iteration. And that's included, that's a necessary thing. But the question then is, how much bigger of a problem do you not need to do that back and forth with in order to get a satisfying or at least okay result? And so if you look back to the 1960s and the ELIZA systems, these one shot means I put some sentence in and then the model takes a set of keywords or a keyword and then turns it back into a question, and it's exploratory in that sense. And so a lot of people found this kind of same hallucinatory process that people are finding with all of the GPTs today. Uh, and they were finding those back in the ELIZA days. Through the 90s and early 2000s, most of these type of search things were kind of set of responses that go through a set of pathways and decision trees. As we get into this, kind of deeper neural network based natural language processing, BERT models, you can actually do something really powerful with sentiment classification and ontology mapping and things like this. After the kind of GPT transformer moment, you see there it's almost like a linear line straight up in terms of how quickly each year those one-shot tasks got more and more complicated. So you can just walk through them. So GPT-2 we don't talk about here because GPT-3 is really where people went crazy with it. I can take a paragraph and I can send it in there and it's going to give me back something functional I can use. Now, it's not a full functioning application necessary, but it's something that I can actually recognize as useful. The next year, once we're actually into products that have millions of users, now we can actually start producing larger files, larger capabilities, multiple files that work together that can communicate because they understand API and interoperability standards. These GPT-4, 4.0, the Claude Sonnets, as we're starting to get into Claude Opus and 5.5, DeepSeek 4, now we're starting to really get to the bigger Gemini models, the VLAs. Now we're starting to get to these very complex sets of outputs that have images, that have audio, that can take in multiple different types of files, right? And so now that we're in 2026, we're at the point where one-shotting is not perfect, and it never will be, because the one shot is a function of how good you are at giving instructions. And so there's only so much you can do. In other words, there's a minimum level of information you need to produce in order to get out a deterministic or somewhat deterministic output. And so that will never be solved fully, right? But we're at the point now where if you can come up with a reasonable set of inputs, then your problem is now orchestrating sets of tools rather than, okay, now I have this single thing and now I need to put it into a set of architectures. We're starting to become the time of architecture being embedded in the one shot. And so that is a transition point. And, when we're talking about these kind of step curves, that's where we're at right now. And so we have to think about it as we can use anything, from that architecture level of the Opus models and 4.8 and the GPT 5.5s and the rest. And you can say you can take those same approaches as you did for the previous ones and own more of that architecture if you want. And so there really is no ceiling anymore. There's no limits to kind of what you can do. It's just a question of how are you going to do it?